Good morning. Welcome to Time in His Word. I was looking at Matthew, the 6th chapter this morning, and I noticed I've got a lot of notes written in the margins around it. I've got a lot of verses highlighted. In fact, one of them, verse 27, it says, "And who of you by being worried can add a single hour to his life?" Beside that verse, I've got it highlighted, and I wrote in capital letters, "Great question." You know, we all worry to one extent or another. Some of us, it consumes us more than others, but that's just how we're made up. But you know, the verse is really a great question. By worrying constantly, what have you done? You haven't added anything. You've subtracted anything. Because scientists tell us and medical people tell us that when you worry, it causes depression and everything associated with that. Then in verse 22, it talks about the eye is a lamp of the body. You know, when you look into somebody's eyes, you can tell the type of person they are. I never could, but my brother, who's a retired law enforcement officer, said that's one of their telltale signs when they're talking to people, how to go about judging their character. I guess it's a learned trait. I don't know. But then and then 33 and 34, because it's only 34 verses long, it says, "But seek his kingdom and his righteousness, and all things will be added to you." So there's another good verse there. So it says, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And how true is that? We can all testify to that. Each day, just as soon as you get one day conquered with problems that you'll encounter, the next day starts and you end up with a whole host of new problems and aggravations for the day. So it's a never-ending deal. But the first part of this chapter, what I want to focus on this morning, talks about prayer. And while all this other stuff that I mentioned is great in its own context and how we just lightly touched on them, it talks about the Lord's Prayer. And I think about that this morning before I put this message together. I have my own study time of a little book I got of Oswald Chambers that a gentleman gave me a number of years ago, and it's a very good book. And before I start studying, I pray, and I pray for knowledge to understand what I'm reading and how it applies and how I can use it in my daily walk. Well, some mornings when I go to pray, it's just like listening to somebody ramble on that can't make a coherent statement. It just bounces all over the place. And prayer sometimes can be like that. And you're trying to focus and you're trying to pray, but your mind starts wandering. You start thinking about, what you had for dinner last night or what you're going to do later on. You just can't focus. And it's not, I always feel like it's not me, it's Satan messing with you. Because other days you can, you have really strong prayer and nothing messes with your concentration. But verse 6 says, "But you, when you pray, go into your inner room, close your door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father sees what is done in secret, will reward you." And then it says, "And when you are praying, do not use meaningless repetitions as Gentiles do, for they purpose that they will be heard for their many words." So he's saying, don't just babble on incoherent where nobody can understand what you're talking about, but try to be specific. And then the great thing is that if we can't figure out how to be specific and we're having trouble praying for the morning, he even goes and tells us a prayer to say that covers everything. And we all know it, what's referred to as the Lord's Prayer. And it goes like this, starting in verse 9. "So pray then in this way, Our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive our debtors as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. So I said, this chapter 6 in Matthew is full of a lot of good stuff. If you got a few minutes today, sit down and read through the chapter. You know, get off in a quiet place, get you a marker or however you like to mark your Bible, and just read the verses and just concentrate on them. There's like you know, I just touched on a few. But what I wanted to get at this morning was, if you're struggling praying of a morning, there's a prime example of a prayer to say. It covers everything, and God gave it to us, and there's nothing better than a gift that's from God.